Alright everyone, so I know it seems somewhat early to talk about this, but actually the past few months we've actually had a lot of PlayStation 5 rumors floating around, and just next-gen rumors in general, and surprisingly, if you take everything that we've learned so far, we actually have a somewhat good idea of what PlayStation 5 will probably be like come 2019 when Sony actually reveals the hardware, when it's slated for a 2020 launch. That's basically what we know for sure in regards to the release dates. But basically, let's get right into it immediately. Now, the first thing to note right away is that PlayStation 5 has probably been in development for a very long time, much longer than you probably think. Traditionally, with console manufacturers, they start working on the next hardware almost immediately after the previous generation had launched. This was actually the case with PlayStation 3, mind you. Back in 2006, Sony launched the PS3, and with that specific situation, actually, the hardware team spent a year after the PS3 focusing on bringing the cost of the hardware down, unsurprisingly so, because the PS3 was rather expensive at $500 and $600 respectively, and Sony was having a hard time selling PS3s. But in 2007, a small team at Sony Corporate did already begin PlayStation 4, and this is the case with most hardware generations. So keep in mind, PlayStation 5 is already well along at this point. But into our first actual rumor, just this past March, it was reported that third-party developers have been given PS5 dev kits. Now, this tells us something very important. If third-party developers already have PlayStation 5 dev kits, that means Sony's first-party teams have had them even longer. So, Media Molecule, Naughty Dog, Sucker Punch, I mean, these guys have probably already had PlayStation 5 dev kits for a while. Sony Santa Monica, I mean, they've all probably got them in some way, shape, or form. Granted, they've probably got it in a very small capacity. You maybe have a few people within those development teams that are allowed access to those dev kits. I mean, especially considering a lot of Sony's first-party studios are still working on PS4 exclusives, but that tells us that first parties definitely have this hardware, and specifically ones that have probably already shipped a PS4 game within the last year. So, for example, Guerrilla Games had shipped Horizon Zero Dawn. You're not going to see another PS4 game from them. These people are already, for sure, working more than likely on a PlayStation 5 game. Our next rumor is that in April, it was reported PlayStation VR tech is going to be baked right into the hardware. Now, this aligns perfectly with Sony's VR vision. What we've been talking about with PlayStation VR for a while is that Sony is doubling down on VR. They absolutely believe in the hardware. So this is absolutely not surprising whatsoever, and what we can expect from this is that, for example, right now PlayStation VR, it's not like it was an afterthought, but it wasn't put together with the PS4 right off the get-go. I mean, if you have a PlayStation VR right now, you know it's a lot of cords. You have a post-processing box, and that's the box that's responsible for reprojecting the image back to the TV, so it's more of a social experience. We can expect PlayStation 5 to possibly have that processing box baked into the hardware level, so that when you buy PlayStation VR 2, 2.0, whatever they end up calling it, it might be more of a situation of a plug-and-play scenario. And it will more than likely still have cords, as Sony and most VR companies have been pretty vocal about the fact that wireless VR is still probably pretty far away. Now, moving on, later in April, actually, so late April, this rumor came out, but Sony, well, not even a rumor, but Sony and Sony Pictures, their subsidiary, submitted a patent application for blockchain technology. Now, yes, this is Sony Corporate and Sony Pictures. It doesn't specifically involve Sony Interactive. However, the patent explicitly states and argues that the blockchain technology can be used for movies, television, video, music, audio, games, scientific data, medical data, etc. Now, yeah, it still seems like games is very much so just blatantly, like, ambiguously being covered in that broad spectrum. But keep in mind, Sony is not afraid to have their divisions working with each other. At one point, the head of Sony Pictures was on Sony's E3 stage debuting, I forget what it was, some sort of initiative that I can't remember off the top of my head. But moving on, in May, it was reported that a Sony programmer was working closely with AMD on Ryzen CPU technology. This is the big one, because this is exactly what Sony was doing with PlayStation 4. Now, if you remember, from PS3 to PS4, Sony went with AMD. They went with x86 architecture. They wanted the system to be developer-led, developer-focused, and they wanted it to be easy to make games on, because that was a problem with the PlayStation 3. And this is what Sony's going to be doing moving forward with PlayStation 5. They're sticking with AMD for not only the CPU, but also going into our next rumor. It was in June that it was also being reported that Sony and AMD were also working on the GPU, which would be AMD Navi, and apparently Sony and AMD are aiming for a 2020 release to get all these hardware components ready for a major hardware release. So this would basically tell us that the system would launch in 2020, and which is why we're also probably expecting Sony to announce the hardware sometime in 2019, as there has to be at least a year, or at least eight months to a year of, you know, build up, discussion, talking, pre-release, and all that nonsense that usually comes with the territory of a brand new generation launch. Now, this last one isn't necessarily a rumor, but it's a grander understanding of where we are right now and where we're going to be within the next 2 years in terms of game development. Because if you look at Sony's first-party studios right now, this is probably the last of PlayStation 4 exclusives. If you're looking at it right now, we've got Spider-Man, Ghost of Tsushima, Days Gone, The Last of Us Part 2, and Dreams. Death Stranding may possibly be a cross-generation title based on the pure fact that the game is still quite far from release. We don't know much about the game. We've only had a handful of trailers. The game could very easily be a PS4 and PS5 game, although certainly it could still be just a PlayStation 4 title. But as it stands right now, it seems like that's probably the most likely out of Sony's games where it would slip into the PS5 territory. But more than likely, all these major PlayStation 4 exclusives are the last PlayStation 4 exclusives we can expect. After that, it's full steam Naughty Dog going into PlayStation 5. Same with Sucker Punch. Same with Sony Bend. Media Molecule, if they still have a place in Sony's landscape right now, because of course Dreams, we don't really know what the hell's going on with Dreams. That game may very likely be a financial bust, which sucks because I am actually really thoroughly interested in that game and it looks quite good. But you know, other than that, those developers are going to start PS5 games, and the current developers that have already shipped their PS4 games, like Polyphony Digital or Guerrilla Games, like I mentioned, they're probably definitely full steam ahead on a PS5 project as it stands right now. If you look at E3, for example, with Bethesda, I mean, they announced Starfield and Elder Scrolls 6, and they openly admitted Starfield is a next-gen title, and they said Elder Scrolls 6 is coming after Starfield. Elder Scrolls 6 is clearly going to be a next-generation game. Rockstar Games, I mean, once they ship Red Dead Redemption 2, guess what? They're probably going to be full steam ahead on the next Grand Theft Auto, and you better believe that that's probably going to be a next-generation title. And it would be far, far out, mind you. The next Grand Theft Auto is probably still 2, 3, 4 years out, you know what I mean? Maybe it will still, you know, at the very end of it, mind you, slip to PS4 and Xbox One as a cross-gen title, because you can't really ignore the fact that there's still going to be 80 million PS4s out there. Well, by the end of 2020, I mean, there's probably going to be well over 100 million PS4s on the market. Same with Microsoft. They're currently at around 35 million Xbox Ones, so they're probably going to be close to 45, 50 million Xbox Ones. You can't ignore that install base. But Rockstar Games, I mean, most major publishers, EA, they're all starting PS5 projects in some way, shape, or form with many of their developers and IP. So what does this all mean? Well, from everything we've heard so far, what it basically seems to surmise is that PlayStation 5 will still be a traditionally powered console that you plug into your television, so no major $100 streaming box or anything like that what Microsoft's pursuing, but they're doing a streaming box and a regular Xbox hardware. But as it stands right now, it seems like we're only getting one regular console, probably priced around $400 or $500, who knows. But it will be backwards compatible because it's going to be using x86. This is currently evident with PS4, PS4 Pro, X1, X1X. We're in a situation now where games can just understand and be and scale to the hardware accordingly. I mean, this was Sony's long-term vision for a while. I think we all kind of saw this coming, so it will more than likely play PlayStation 4 games right off the bat, and whatever else is on that storefront. So anything that's currently supported on PS4, that will be your new storefront on PlayStation 5, and I'm sure Sony wants to have that digital storefront ready and packed with tons of content. It will more than likely feature PlayStation VR 2 in some way, shape, or form, whether that comes whether that's announced right away with PS5 or if it comes after the fact remains to be seen. But Sony will definitely be focusing on PlayStation VR hardware for sure. It may possibly include blockchain technology, so that would have some sort of digital rights management built into the system. Maybe you could buy and sell digital goods, something like that. That's not totally outside of the realms of impossibility. And while there are very few rumors regarding PlayStation Now and what it's going to look like on PS5, it's more than likely still going to play a pretty big key role, considering Sony has put so many games on there, and, well, everybody is still pretty adamant about streaming. So, yeah, Sony's been preparing for this for a very long time, and so they're probably going to be putting a lot more PS2, PS3, PS4 games on there to make it more of an enticing service, and they probably want to double down on it in some way, make sure there's even lower latency, and they want to compete with any other streaming services that come to the market. In terms of release, Sony and AMD are aiming for 2020, so Unless they fall behind schedule, you can probably expect an announcement in 2019, and then the system will launch in 2020. And that's pretty much it. That's all we know right now about PlayStation 5 next generation. Thank you all for watching. Keep in mind, this is a dated video. I mean, this is, what, late July, early August 2018, so in the coming months, we'll probably get more PS5 rumors, making this video either totally irrelevant or more relevant as the things we just said become more and more truthful. But otherwise, that's pretty much it. Subscribe to this channel for more PlayStation news, reviews, coverage, full-on everything, PS5 rumors, whatever you name it, we've got it here. That's it for me in this video, and I'll see you all in the next one. Take it easy.